Hello everybody, welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet, and today we're going to be taking a look at a vertical haiku from P.H. Fischer from the latest issue of Kingfisher. The first line of that, or the first phrase of this, is called Lifeline. Lifeline. It's going to be a fun one. And with that, sit back, relax, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's vertical haiku. Welcome back, everybody. Good to be with you again for episode 52 of Haiku Talk. This poem is an interesting one, and you're going to see how it bends along the screen as I read it. So the poem by P.H. Fischer goes like this. Lifeline. Her nail halts on my palm. Lifeline. Her nail halts on my palm. Really good piece, and it's formatted in a very interesting way, almost concrete poem-like. And a concrete poem is when a poem is written to match the shape of what it is, the content of the poem. So sometimes if you have like you might see a Christmas poem that's written, the lines are broken in the shape of a Christmas tree as a silly example. Or in this case, we have what almost looks like the lines on your hand and the way that they kind of curve, curve downward. So you see the poem kind of moving in that way down the screen, down the page. And it's the only one in this issue that follows that kind of format. And I don't see this terribly often. I guess there is another vertical poem in here. But vertical poems are a thing. We just haven't really encountered them on this channel, partly because it's been kind of hard to find them where they fit nicely on the format of this of the channel. This one was just interesting because not only is it vertical, but it also has that bending arc to it. So it actually kind of follows the curve of what a lifeline or lines would be like on your hand. And I thought that was an interesting element that really made the poem pop even more for me on the page. Now, the poem does still follow, even though it is vertical, it does kind of follow the fragment and the phrase formatting that we normally see, with the fragment being lifeline and the phrase being her nail halts on my palm. So when we're talking about this poem, normally I break things down line by line. I'm going to break it up into 3 sections and still talk it through. But ultimately this poem, what it does, just as other poems do, just like the last one in episode 51, for example, is they put you into a moment. In the last example we had a poem where it took you into a moment when you've gone too far. So it's that something is happening and you get to a pivotal moment, and then the poem leaves you in that feeling of, oh, I've gone too far. In this case, we have lifeline. Her nail halts on my palm, where the poem sets you up, and where the poem ends is actually the real. I mean, it ends at, leaving you hanging by the thread here, hanging by the line. I don't know how I feel about palm reading and soothsaying and all of that stuff. I know I don't ever really want to have my palm read. Just don't want to have anything color my perception of what my future might hold, one way or the other. And this one is just really tense because her nail halts on my palm. So it halts on the lifeline. So as you're getting your palm read, and again, when we read this poem, we need to read this poem as if it's happening to us. We don't want to think about what happened to P.H. Fischer. Again, focus on yourself entering the moment of the poem. What do you see? So for me, when I read this poem, I think lifeline. Her hand halts on my palm. So her hand is halting on my palm, not the poet's palm, my palm. And so what happens then is when we get to the end of that poem and this person stops the end of my lifeline or stops on the lifeline on my palm, I'm left wondering, ooh, what does she see? What does she read? How does she read into this? That is, and I guess your personality type, if you're a glass half full or glass half empty person, you could be positive or negative on how you walk away from the moment captured in this poem. And that's what this is. It captures a moment beautifully to get you to where her finger stops on the palm of the hand, and then we have to figure out what happens next and reckon with what happens next. That's really, really interesting and really, really fascinating and a great moment of tension. I really, really enjoy this piece. And so let's break this down, kind of group it down bit by bit. So the first line, if you will, is the fragment, which is lifeline. And what does that do? It kind of establishes what's happening in the poem. Lifeline, generally speaking, I mean, it could be a number of things. It could be a lifeline. Your phone call is your lifeline, or the lifeline in the palm of your hand. As we move through the poem, we learn contextually that it's the palm of your hand. But lifeline, that's where it starts to pique your imagination, pique your interest. And because it's written vertically, and it kind of goes from the right side of the screen to right side of the page to the left, it's going backwards in the way you're normally reading things. You can't help but be intrigued just to follow that forward, follow the movement of the poem forward. So lifeline, good first fragment, first chunk of this poem. The next chunk for me is her nail halts, because that itself is kind of a phrase. Her nail halts. So we have lifeline, and then the next bit of information we learn is her nail halts. So we know that it's actually a lifeline on a hand, and somebody is putting their finger, running it down a hand, and that hand stops, and it's finding, going down the lifeline of the finger. So again, her nail halts. It's like, wow, that's a really tense moment. You're getting your palm read, running your hand, reading your lifeline, and it stops. And it's interesting that it's not her finger that stops, it's the nail, which is just an added bit of playful language there to really make it more intriguing and more sharp, more pointed, more it raises the stakes, raises the tension a little bit, where a finger would be more of a gentle placement, but the nail, running the nail down and the nail halting, it's word choice, it's poetic word choice that, again, raises tension, raises the sense of danger almost. And then the last section is on my palm, on my palm. And so, it further, it completes that we know now it's a lifeline on my palm. It completes the whole image. And now we're left with that nail that is halted on the palm. And the poem just ends. It's the pause. It's we don't know what the reading is. We don't know what the remnant is. We don't know how this resolves. We're just left with this moment, this tense moment of this happening. And I just keep doing this to my hand, just keep doing it over as I'm talking through this. Just like, someone's looking at it, reading it, and it just, the nail stops. And I know whatever happens, there's going to be a talk between me, who's getting my palm read, and the she, that's the palm reader, as to what she thinks she sees in my palm reading. Really nice tension, really nice use of form, really that engages the reader, helps follow you through this kind of this interesting pattern, this interesting process of a palm reading. It's where your eyes kind of mimic the same pattern that the nail is taking on somebody's palm. I really like that. And again, we haven't seen this yet on the channel. I wanted to highlight, again, a different way that you can construct a poem to help emphasize what's happening in the piece. And I would always suggest that if you are using a form like this, is to make sure that it really does something to the poem, that it's not just a distraction. In this case, it's very much integrated into what the action of the poem is, and it's used very effectively. So thank you, Kingfisher, for another nice issue, and thank you, P.H. Fischer, for a wonderful, wonderful poem. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Haiku Talk, and until next time, cheers.